Russ.
Okay. Thank you, Donnie. Y'all, we have a really special speaker this morning, and our people didn't have to work with his people very long at all. It's amazing. Keith, stand up, please. Come over here. Okay. Now, you've seen Keith. You thought he was a double agent, but not so. But when I tell you what he's done, you may think that.
You usually have two little children climbing on me?
Yes, two little children normally. Keith went to Lipscomb. Anybody went to Lipscomb here? Or hold up your hand if you went to Lipscomb. All right. Okay, good. Good, see? All right. But he has a PhD in chemistry from UAB. And Keith is an author of two books. One, Plugged In, it's about the video game industry, but one called Rare, about rare earth metals. The man is an economic wizard. Okay. No, really, he writes about economics. I'm not kidding you. All right, matter of fact, he had in-laws here this weekend, and all they wanted to talk about was the election and economics and all. So
I ran out the door.
Thank
you so much.
So he is glad to be here to talk to us this morning. Please help me welcome a man who is writing a new children's book about economics. It's called Buy Low, Sell High. Keith
Work for everything.
Veronese.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Hey, everybody. I'm going to move around with this, if that's okay. I was here. I try to go to this class when I can. I usually get sent to this class when I groan too much in our class by my wife. So that's kind of why we sit in the back over there, is because I tend to roll my eyes a little too much. But mic's not working? Up more? Okay. 2 weeks ago, I want to thank you for your talk 2 weeks ago. I lived in Montgomery, went to the same schools. Time shifted by about 30 years. But I think we went to the same church. You okay? I'm 6. That'll make a lot of sense for today, actually. Did you go to Carriage Hills, per chance?
No, I
didn't. Okay. I didn't know. I went to Carriage Hills in Vaughn Park. But yeah, no, I appreciate it. The city's come a long way in that time, and a lot of it's the work that your generation did, so I appreciate it. I do like this class a lot. It's a little more laid back. I like it. Sadly, I'm probably going to do the opposite discussion that Justin did this morning. So we'll go ahead and go on to this first slide. And if you can't see the slides, I've got handouts, because I got kicked out of Boy Scouts, but I remembered some of the things from Boy Scouts. All right, yeah. If you do know who wrote this, or you Google it, keep it quiet for a few slides. They say people in hell suffer eternal pain because of the loss of God. They would go through all that suffering if they had just a little hope of possessing God. In my soul, I feel that just the terrible pain of loss, of God not wanting me, of God not being God, of God not really existing. Jesus, forgive my blasphemies. I've been told to write everything. The darkness surrounds me on all sides. I can't lift my soul to God. So to start off encouraging words with that, I apologize. But you might be encouraged as to who wrote that later on. So let's start with the slide after this. I do thank Tech Arts for doing that. Being chemistry PhD, I did way too many plots in talks like this, so I worked on a couple plots here. This is from the blog 538. If you guys are familiar with Nate Silver, ESPN, 538 comes from the number of electoral votes you need to win, the total electoral votes in the United States. He guessed the last 2 presidential elections correctly based on statistical analysis, and since then, it's basically just been a numerical analysis site. So writers will come in, their subject they like. This is an article by a female named Leila Briscoe. She actually was an atheist that converted to Catholicism a couple years back. Wanted to look at shape note singing and its comparison to modern Christian and basically radio and worship singing. This will tie into what we're talking about a little bit later. So she just ran a statistical analysis of positive and negative words, so death, life, sin, grace. And there's some interesting results here. I'll go ahead and show my hand a little bit. If you put on Christian radio in my car, I'll probably throw a rock at you. I don't like it. I can hear it from a mile away. Like if it's regular hymns, I'm fine with it. I don't like the poppier stuff. But go ahead, next slide. All right, modern Christian radio and worship songs. You've got a pretty dramatic discrepancy in the types of words used. 2.5 times more grace than sin. A big change in the amount of fear and love and sin and grace. Whereas if you look back at some of our previous tradition songs, shotgun singing, the author who wrote this actually goes to a monthly 3-hour singing. Those are all realities, okay? You talk about sin with grace, you talk about death with life, all right? We've kind of lost a little bit of that as the years have gone on. So next slide. Yeah, no, sorry, next slide after that, my bad. Oh, previous one. All right, if you look back at what the best, I guess the biblical, comparison to a songbook as we have is the Psalms. All right, 65 of the 150 Psalms are considered lament Psalms, either for the, David's individual lament or whoever the author was at the time, or a corporate lament for Israel. One of the more famous ones, written by David, later quoted by Jesus on the cross, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries of anguish? My God, I cry out you by day, but you do not answer, by night, but I find no rest. Now later on, that psalm turns a little happier. It still kind of ends on a tone of not knowing what's going on. Next slide. And then we compare the Psalms to our individual songbooks. All right, the red bar is a Baptist hymnal. The green bar is the predominant Lutheran hymnal, and Songs of Faith and Grace is in the purple bar. So, we overemphasize thanksgiving and trust. We kind of keep it about on par with praise with what the Psalms would be. And then lament, Psalms greatly outweigh what it would be. So it's just, we like to push this out a little bit. Lament's a real part of my life. We'll get onto that discussion a little bit later. Next slide. If you look at all the prayers in the Bible, 43% of them are about complaint. Now, complaint isn't necessarily complaint arguing, I don't like this. It's more of I'm bothered by this, I'm disturbed by this. Why aren't you here? Why aren't you listening? I could make the argument that you could say in a way complaint would be good. A lot of times I feel like, and I'll get on a little bit about this on the next slide, our doubt and struggle, if we internalize them and don't vocalize them, it just gets worse, okay? I probably vacillate between a believer to an agnostic back and forth pretty frequently, believer now for a while. But let's talk about what follows that complaint. Psalms 22. Psalms 23 is one right after it, all right? Valley of the Shadow of Death. We teach it to our kids. It's one of the most beloved psalms we have. If we take it from a chronological perspective, the 23 came right after 22. Those prayers were answered. He cried, but they were answered. And, if we go with the sunny side kind of Christianity, are we producing an unrealistic view of how we live? Take a look at where we're coming from and where we are going and be introspective about where we've been. Go ahead and next slide. This article ends with a discussion of a theory about winter and summer Christians. Started about in the early 1980s. There's a book called A Cry of Absence by Martin Marty. It's gone out of print since then. But Richard Beck of Abilene Christian, he taught at Lipscomb for a little while. He's an Arkansas boy. He's really, excuse me, as I go completely dry mouth. He's very sought after on the speaking tours, particularly in Europe. He's a psychology professor at Abilene. He's kind of done a lot of work and a lot of thought and a lot of talk about this whole winter and summer Christian idea. All right, that you basically have your predominant form of Christian on the next slide. Okay, so looking back at where our tradition typically comes from, it's polar model of faith is what he says. This is one of the last plots we'll see. I apologize for the number of plots. So basically, if you have a lot of complaint, where complaint means disappointment, frustration, lament, and doubt, basically a lot of struggle, you're basically seeing as not being faithful at all. It's kind of a pathologization, at least in my generation, of faith. I don't think this goes back as far as I would think it would, but now, where otherwise, if you go through your life pretty happy, visibly a happy Christian, don't struggle, you're seen as pretty happy, and very faithful. Basically, our picture of faithful, happy Christians is, jumping, singing, dancing, happy, whereas we know that's probably not a reality. Next slide. Now, Beck puts out, this is a little bit harder to see, kind of a quadrant. So upper right, we have what he calls winter Christians. So basically, a lot of struggle, but you're still walk with God. You're basically the wrestling with God idea. Not constantly, but a good bit of your life. Struggle, whatnot. Upper left quadrant, summer Christians. So not a lot of complaint, pretty much happy, joy, shiny, happy people kind of idea. Not a lot of complaint. And below that, probably disengaged believers and spiritual critics, where, the right quadrant pretty much speaks to me. I'll go back and forth. Sometimes I'll vacillate to disengaged believers. But this was this was a concept I was really glad to see. I saw it this summer. I had been struggling with, being pretty grumpy about my spiritual life. I usually leave church a lot less happy. Really not that happy at all usually when I leave. My wife will call me out on it, which is good. Just put off by some stuff. I'm cynical. I was born, my mom used to say I was the youngest cynic she ever knew. I had a weird childhood. Cuteness puts me off. I shouldn't say that. I have 2 little girls who are 2 years old. I shouldn't say cute things bother me, but cuteness in spiritual situations really bothers me. I'm probably way too serious than I should be for my own good with that, but that's just the kind of person I ended up being. So this idea that you could have a less shiny, happy Christianity kind of point of view, not necessarily a label, not necessarily a divide, but this was okay, that you could struggle, was kind of open and was kind of welcoming to me. And I know a lot of that is I feel a lot of that came from the type of worship I experienced as a youth. It was kind of, not flamboyant, but it was kind of out there. I've probably been through about 2,000 chapels. If they say anything about familiarity, rating, contempt, I've probably heard a lot of the same chapel things like over and over again throughout my life. It's probably about 40 years worth of Sundays I got tacked on there. So in my maybe not being nearly as wise as I'd have ever been and been happy to be through it, just the kind of grumpiness that goes through that. So next slide if you don't mind. So Beck posits that one of the great key texts for a winter Christian, or when he perceives it, he himself identifies as a winter Christian. And I want to say that there's nothing wrong with either one of these, not a label, there's nothing, just takes all kinds. Though he slay me, I will hope in him. Nevertheless, I will argue my ways before him. Just that idea of constantly going not to battle, but not that Christianity's flying, but it's more kind of a wrestling match or a knife fight at times when you look at the rest of the world. Experiences of questioning, distance, and wondering, but not necessarily wandering. So I'll give a little bit of perspective on that from my youth. I grew up in a very religious family outside of my external family unit. I didn't really grow up with a father figure, that kind of stuff, but my family had a lot to do with a lot of churches and a lot of church education and a lot of the schools from where I'm from. And kind of my brother and I were shunned for the most of that. So we didn't exactly see the happiest part of, we'll just say a lot of religious people who shouldn't have done good things, shouldn't have done bad things, did some bad stuff, and did some rough stuff that we grew up with. And it took a long time to get over that, questioning, distance, and wandering. My brother at this point would not identify. You would not see him come through these doors unless it was something for my kids. And I can kind of understand that. And most of my friends outside of church are agnostic or atheist, or were former church members. And to speak to what was in the sermon, I would not ever cut them off. I adore them. They're my friends. If I were to cut them off, I feel like I would be doing a disservice to them and to God, because they've already been cut off from way too many other people in their lives. They've lost family connections, and if I can be there, if I can put up with their horrible things they say about church at times and just do it with not necessarily a smile, but not a look of disdain or anger, there might be hope still. Going back to perspectives or characteristics of winter Christian that Beck puts forth, highly introspective, probably way too melancholy. I'm in my head a lot. Kind of go through the end of the day. What have I accomplished? What am I going to accomplish the next day? And we touch on the narrative of injury. Next slide. The summer Christian that he puts forth, predominant visual view of modern Christianity, the shiny, happy thing. expressed by daily experiences of God moving in their life and the life of others. When people, this is not something I identify with. I do on a long 5 to 10 year kind of plan kind of thing. But if I look up, I found $5, I'm way too likely to put it off as a statistical probability or an accident, as God put $5 there for me to pick up or give to someone else. Overwhelming sense of joy and confidence in moving forward. You could probably say that they're kind of our prayer warriors. You see God moving in other things where other people might not necessarily see him working. That's just not my point of view. However, not point of view, I shouldn't say that. That's not how I see things, but that's just on me. I'm way too rational, probably had way too much school, just I can go with that. So next slide. All right, we'll go back to this paragraph that we had earlier. Anybody know who wrote this? Any guesses? Pretty close, actually. Mother Teresa. This was done 1959 in Calcutta. If you look back at her diary that came out in 2007, this is one of the things that I felt like I could put on the slide well and not totally offend everyone. I don't know, I've probably offended like half the people in the room already. We won't be at church next week probably, but this is one of her things that's easier to stomach. There's some just heartbreaking stuff there. And if Mother Teresa can experience this, and if pretty much the majority of her life, people have said 6 decades of her life, her confessions, this is actually a text from a written confession to her bishop. If she can write these things over 6 decades, there has to be something there. It's frightening, it's scary, there has to be something there. Next slide. Now, this gets a little bit into, if you look at the idea of the dark night of the soul, I want to put that out as that's not the winter Christian idea necessarily, but a lot of Catholic traditions say that Mother Teresa's period of crisis explained away as part of a spiritual journey. She calls in all these letters, she feels like she's not getting an answer. It's just an absence. Not that she quits calling, by no means does she quit calling, but just the fact that she feels like she's not getting an answer. And a cycle of shame in that not being answered. No matter what she did, no matter what good she did on earth, she didn't feel like that was getting any closer to God. And that also goes faith and works, but that's not the discussion here. The idea of the dark night of the soul was put forth in the 16th century by St. John of the Cross. He's said to have possessed this back in, for about 45 years. The most extensive case on record, they say is 59 years, they say it's Mother Teresa. The idea that, I'm putting this here to put that, you can be a spiritual giant and still have these feelings. This isn't to say that this is a winter Christian idea or summer Christian idea, but just, it's shocking when you see that someone as beloved as that could have that feeling. Next slide. So the idea, anybody taken the Myers-Briggs test? We've been made to take it about 1 billion times. Extrovert, introvert is the main idea there. I'm a quiet person. I would just assume sit in the corner of the room and not say anything for about 2 hours. And then somehow I'm up here doing this. But, that gets into part of my personality. My wife's an extrovert. She will talk to basically anyone. The idea of walking into church, I will not lie, the idea of walking into church and having to talk to people frightens me. Do you remember when we used to do the handshake thing, like the first 10 minutes of worship? I would leave and go to the restroom if I didn't know somebody I would talk to. I'm glad I have you guys now that I can talk to at least. These are the people I sit near at church, and I love them. And I'm grateful they don't laugh at me when I probably groan or roll my eyes a little too much in church. But just the sense of, my personality tends toward a little bit of stoicism. Just what I've been through, my life, that kind of thing. The tendency to feel kind of off on your own island worship when everybody's happy and excited, and we're talking about I Want to Run Into Your Arms and that song Forever Rains. I've never ran into anything's arms, and I'm probably not going to start tomorrow or today during church. That's just my personality, no matter how up or excited I get about anything. And that tends to the whole, modern hymns and older hymns. One of the things I do like about this class is we get some of the older stuff in there. I was a choir boy growing up. at ACA, COC, that kind of thing. But we were taught to, look at the words that we were singing. If you couldn't sing those words, you probably shouldn't be singing them. The older hymns just kind of speak to me a little bit more than the new ones. And the idea of, just the daddiness that our church might tend to. There's a great book called Why Men Hate Church. I don't agree with everything that came out of it. It came out in 2011. Basically talks about how some of our ideas, the concepts of daddiness of God, which is great. I mean, if that works for you, that's great. It's kind of off-putting to me in a lot of ways, whereas the lordship of God and the lordship of Jesus speaks a lot more to me. And if, church tends to move one way or the other, there can be issues. But if you see that you don't like that part, it brings me a lot of okay, that's just what, I can identify it. This is a daddy song. I can live with it and move on. And, part of that probably does come from a masculine point of view. Next slide. We're finishing up. So, talking more about where I come from as a grumpy human being, I do get uplifted by a small group far more than I do a worship experience. So it's even if we just didn't do anything in our small group, I'm a lot happier after leaving small group, just because it's a little more real. Everybody you smile when we're in worship here. Everything's fine. The worst thing we have to talk about is traffic or something like that. Whereas if it's a small group, I can say, I've had a horrible week. I can be a little bit more myself, be a little grumpier, tell a few jokes that would get me in trouble elsewhere. Not really. Usually good. And study. I spend a reasonable amount of time, maybe it's not necessarily Bible study, but it's commentary study, and I'm really uplifted by that. So more it's just identifying if you are a winter Christian, if you aren't getting what you need from church, you could probably get it from elsewhere. As long as you get it, that's a beneficial thing. That was very encouraged me to find this out, and a lot of my friends that I went to Lipscomb with, you tend to find people and gravitate toward people that are like you, so I have a bunch of grumpy friends, and thankfully they passed along that article to me as they were going through that. And one of the ideas that seasons change. I know at some point I was a happier person. Now I'm a happier Christian. I would have gone up there and sang at one point, probably in high school, and been happy to do that. But at this point in my life, it's not going to happen. But I might sometime in the future, and just grappling with that. I'm not any further in frustration. Maybe a little more further in frustration. But working with it and struggling with it, and instead of just not trying that. So the last little bit of a slide is from Augustine of Hippo, 5th century Christian theologian. Winter, we're talking about Colossians 3:4, so it's basically the life in Christ verse. In winter, the green tree is like the dry. Summer comes, and the living root produces leaves and fruits. So our winter is the concealment of Christ. Our summer is his manifestation. Yes, dead full surely, but dead in appearance, alive at the roots. And the thing of the summer burst, which is to follow, when Christ, who is our life, shall appear. Basically, seasons follow. To echo what Justin said, thankfully we have spring and summer afterwards, and things do get better and things change. So I apologize if there's any offense here. I didn't mean the rest. So thank you guys.